Mind calm, body at ease, breathing quiet, sentiment benevolent. Dharma friends, sitting still in vital silence, wanting nothing, we practice Eco-Buddhism together. The sound of the temple bell booms for all to cease from conflict. May the way of Buddha usher in the dawn of non-violent global village forever. Here is the after sound of the bell. Thunder of silence, light after Dharma rain. Om Amoga Vairocana Maha Mudra Manipadma Shabala Padataya
Please take a moment to straighten your mats and cushions and then come stand together facing the altar. In keeping with our tradition, we will first take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha in Sino-Korean, and then a second time in English. So just composing yourself, bringing your hands palm to palm, gazing at the altar. And even if you do not know the words of the chant, see if you can throw your voice in with the sound. I go for refuge to the Buddha.
I go for refuge to the Buddha,
And resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment
And realize the great way.
and realize the great way.
I go for refuge to the Dharma.
I go for refuge to the Dharma,
And resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will penetrate the teachings.
I will penetrate the teachings
And uncover oceans of wisdom.
and uncover oceans of wisdom.
I go for refuge to the Sangha.
I go for refuge to the Sangha,
And resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will seek peace and happiness for the many.
I will seek peace and happiness for many,
And transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
Please return to your places now for another shorter period of meditation. Taking a moment to check in with your posture. It can be helpful to lean forward on the fists, straighten the spine, and then palms facing, raising the arms overhead, turning the palms out, and slowly lowering, feeling shoulder blades sliding down the back, and the spine naturally in harmony with gravity. Bringing our hands into the meditation mudra posture, left fingers on top of right, thumbs slightly touching, uniting the left and right sides of the body. A sense of quiet ease and alertness. And then go to your practice for a few minutes, whether that is silently counting the out breath, just noticing the breath moving in the body, or whatever your practice is, for a few minutes. Join me in these simple mindfulness exercises. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jagwa Kelly Davenport. I'm one of the Dharma teachers here in Ann Arbor, and it's lovely to see all of you here on this Mother's Day. We have a special service today about Mother's Day. And so I just wanted to start with kind of a brief talk, and then we'll do a special ritual in remembering and honoring our mothers. So I live in a small community of condominiums that have a shared kind of backyard space, a green space. And there's a woman who lives a couple of doors down from us who, in the evenings, takes her cat out for a walk on a leash. And, cats don't really walk on leashes. So she's really more kind of accompanying the cat. It's a very tender thing because she just sort of slowly walking beside the cat, sort of following along. She makes sure that there's no tension on the leash, But then occasionally I'll look up in the evening when I'm sitting in my bedroom and I see her in the backyard and she's just running as fast as she can because the cat has seen something that the cat wants to go after. And so she's trying to keep up as best that she can. And so the other night when I was doing some research and preparing some thoughts for this talk, I saw her out there walking the cat. And I wasn't sure why, but I felt like the warmth of tears a little bit because I was so struck by this kind of sweetness. And here I was doing all this reading and research and kind of thinking about mothers. And I would say, I think it's because the reason that emotion came up was I recognized in some ways how much I wanted that kind of sweet accompaniment of my own mother and how much in my childhood really felt more like I would have been walking a tiger on a leash. My mother is, she just turned 70 this year. She's about 5'3", and she's very fierce. She is not afraid of anybody. She likes to wear cowboy boots. And let's see, a couple stories about her. So one is that when I was born, it was in a small town outside Atlanta, Georgia. And my mom was just hugely pregnant because she loved going to Baskin Robbins. And in the late 70s, early 80s, they just said, eat whatever makes you feel good. So she ate a lot of smoked almond fudge, and she had a huge belly. She weighed more than my dad, who was a head taller than her. And she wore these beautiful kind of like 1970s muumuu dresses. That was the only thing that still fit. And she went into labor early one morning in July of 1981. It was very hot, I imagine. And so my dad put her in the back of the car, but she didn't feel good. She felt kind of nauseous, and so she just laid down in the back of the car, and she had one of these dresses on, and she had her legs kind of propped up on the side, and the windows were rolled down, and they drove past a construction site, and all the construction workers cheered on the way to the hospital. And so she told me about that. And then another story about her was a few years ago. She had been a journalist, and then she went into public relations work and worked for various organizations, but she still really had that journalist mindset of kind of like sticking it to the man. And she had been sort of in a little bit of a conflict with some of the administration of this organization that she worked for, and she really didn't believe in this guy who was running the place, and felt like there had been some misbehavior and corruption. And so one day she was in the elevator with him, and you might think this person who's multiple levels above your boss wouldn't necessarily say anything to them. But my mom walked up to him and said, "You know what? I'm not afraid of you." And then he got off the elevator, I guess. I'm not sure what happened after that.
What did
She said, "I'm not afraid of you."
Oh.
So you can see the tiger-like elements, right? And you might think that I would have a little bit more facility with tigers because we have them in so many of our Korean Zen stories, particularly. There were actually tigers that lived on the Korean Peninsula. They're gone now. And so they appear in many stories. And we have a particular saying that we teach in the meditation class when we're talking about training our minds. But it reminds me of my mom a little bit. And it is, when you throw a stick at a dog, the dog goes chasing after the stick. When you throw a stick at a tiger, the tiger comes after you. So I guess this is just a way of saying that I wanted to recognize and honor the ways in which Mother's Day can be complicated. And I think that's why when I saw the woman with the cat, that made me think of my mom. And yet, I want to kind of appreciate that complication. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Buddha taught about our relationship with our parents, which is this first, so core and integral relationship in our lives, and unlike any other relationship, and maybe sometimes the most challenging one too. Because as much as I might see myself different from her, the older I get, I look down at my hands and I see her hands. And so I'm always kind of asking a question, like, what is it that is the nature of this relationship, this challenge where she challenges me, and the way that she has really inspired me in a lot of ways too. So today, I guess the theme is about complex women. You're also going to hear the story of the woman who raised the Buddha, who was not actually his biological mother. As you're going to hear his birth story over the next couple of weekends, because the reason why these lanterns are hung up here is we are celebrating Buddha's birth, commemorating it. His own mother died 7 days after his birth, and so he was raised by his aunt. So you'll hear a little bit about her as well. So I wanted to start then with the article that I was reading the other night when I saw the woman with the cat. And it kind of just struck me in a different way. So there's a contemporary Theravada monk who is British in origin. His name is Ajahn Amaro. He's written many books. And so I was reading an essay that he had written about his mom. And so I wanted to share a little bit about what he says here. And I'll try to do the accent when we get to the mom part because she's British. The Buddha once said that if you were to carry your parents around with you for their whole lives, your father on one shoulder and your mother on the other, even to the point where they were losing their faculties and their excrement was running down your back, this would not repay your debt of gratitude to them. But you could repay the debt if your parents were not virtuous and you established them in virtue. If they were not wise and you established them in wisdom. If they were stingy and you established them in generosity. If they had no faith in the spiritual path and you led them to it. One day, many years ago, I spoke of this teaching very matter-of-factly with my mother, assuming that she would be as impressed as I was with how highly the Buddha praised the role that parents play in one's life. She responded, as she almost invariably did, anytime I tried to spout some spiritual statement by saying, "What utter balls!" She is very good at keeping me level, as I can get somewhat airy-fairy at times. Her point was, this isn't a one-way process. She said, why do you talk about it in terms of being in debt? What could be more wonderful and satisfying than bringing children into the world and watching them grow? It isn't like a job that you need to be paid for. I was really impressed by that, he says. And so I went looking for this sutra because I think I had read it maybe many years ago and hadn't revisited it in quite a while. And so I went and found one translation of this section that he's referring to. So let's take a look at it a little bit more closely because I think his mother is actually quite spot on with what the message was here. So this is from the sutra. I tell you, monks, there are two people who are not easy to repay. Which two? Your mother and father. Even if you were to carry your mother on one shoulder and your father on the other shoulder for 100 years, and were to look after them by anointing, massaging, bathing, and rubbing their limbs, and they were to defecate and urinate right there on your shoulders, you would not in that way pay or repay your parents. If you were to establish your mother and father in absolute sovereignty over this great earth, abounding in the 7 treasures, you would not in that way pay or repay your parents. Why is that? Mother and father do much for their children. They care for them, they nourish them, they introduce them to this world. But anyone who rouses his unbelieving mother and father, settles and establishes them in conviction, rouses his unvirtuous mother and father, settles and establishes them in virtue, rouses his stingy mother and father, settles and establishes them in generosity, rouses his foolish mother and father, settles and establishes them in discernment. To this extent, one pays and repays one's mother and father. And I think what Ajahn Amaro's mother is responding to is, maybe the first time I read that too, I thought through my own cultural lens that this was somehow about repaying a debt, that it was about guilt, or somehow kind of debt that could never be repaid, because we think about our lives in those terms, I think, in our culture a lot, debt and transactions. But in the Buddhist worldview, and we were talking about this a little bit yesterday in a meeting of our training students when we were talking about repentance practice. Guilt is actually considered in the Buddhist worldview to be an unwholesome state of mind. That when we are acting, even if our intentions and even our actions born out of guilt are positive or helpful to others, that actually the way that that action has arisen out of guilt can actually create further suffering, further karma for us to have to resolve. And so I think this passage is about something that we spoke about in this meeting yesterday. And it's a phrase that our Dharma teacher, Kusa, Ivan Meyerhofer, who lives in North Carolina, you may have met him here a few times. He uses the phrase deep interrelationality. Deep interrelationality. And I think that's what this sutra is about. Because on the one hand, the Buddha is saying, you can never repay the hard work of your parents, even if you were to attempt to care for them tenfold the way they have cared for you. And yet, the Buddha is also saying that truly repaying our parents is really waking up together. Because how could I establish my parents in discernment if I cannot myself be discerning? So there is that relationality coming up. It's not one person over the other. It's not repaying a debt, but it is this joyful process of waking up together. So the other thing that came up about this in our discussion yesterday is, we have this image of monks meditating in a little hut out in the forest or something like that. It sounds very peaceful. And one of our students said yesterday, when I'm at home alone, I'm already enlightened. And then when other people come into the mix, that it gets a little bit harder. And that's not a mistake. It's not like we're only trying to create the conditions in which we're the monk alone in the hut. The waking up part only happens in that deep interrelationality. So Ajahn Amaro goes on to talk about a couple of other really interesting examples. So two particular Buddhist leaders that he had encountered in his spiritual career, if you will, their names were Ajahn Chah and Sri Ramana. And he writes about how they decided to honor their mothers upon their mothers' deaths. So he says, like Ajahn Chah, Sri Ramana's mother became his disciple and went to live at the bottom of the mountain where he was in a cave at the top. After she died, he too built his ashram on the place where she was cremated. So here are these two highly accomplished, extraordinarily detached beings who both built their temples on their mother's ashes. Of course, this may have no significance whatsoever. But to me, it indicates that they're not saying all conditioned things are impermanent. My mother is just a formation in nature like any other, and it's no big deal. There's a mysterious twinning here of both the realization of ultimate truth and the recognition of the unique quality of that personal connection on the material plane. It's almost as if the mother is the primordial symbol of the source of reality, just as she is the source of life on the physical plane. After all, in the West, we freely use the term Mother Nature, and nature is another word for Dharma. So perhaps it is natural and perfectly appropriate to accord this being with whom we have a unique relationship a special position among all the dimensions of life that we experience. And so I wanted to talk a little bit then about this woman that I mentioned, the woman who raised the Buddha. And there was a wonderful book published that I discovered in my research just last year called The Woman Who Raised the Buddha by Wendy Garling, who's a Buddhist scholar. And her project is really to kind of dig into some of the forgotten stories and writings of that era and try to reconstruct more of the feminine history of Buddhism. And so this is a book about the woman who was the sister of the biological mother of the Buddha. So I want to talk a little bit about her. So the Buddha was born, and you'll hear his birth story over the next couple of weekends if you come to the Buddhist birthday ceremonies, as a baby boy named Siddhartha to King Suddhodana and his wife, Queen Maya. And Maya died about 7 days after giving birth, and her sister, Gautami, became Siddhartha's mother. And one of the things that Wendy Garling points out is that in our rhetoric, we frequently refer to her as the Buddhist aunt, but she's saying, this was his mother too, because she actually was the one who raised him in life. So kind of restoring her to that position. And she also became a very strong advocate later for women monastics. And so she was the leader of a group of several hundred women who joined the monastic community and practiced with the Buddha. And so she is our first female Buddhist ancestor as well. So we know her today. Her name was Gautami, but she is remembered by the name Mahapajapati, which is in the Pali language, which can be translated something like Venerable Mother or Great Queen Mother. So according to Wendy, there are actually very few texts or stories handed down about her role in the Buddha's early life. We don't know much about their relationship until he had already gone and left home and become this great spiritual teacher, and then she sought him out again later in life. But she does appear in the Jataka Tales, which is the collection of stories about the Buddha's past lives. And so there's a poem, you'll hear the longer version of it at the end of this talk, that she kind of alludes to her own understanding of her past lives. So I'll read a section of it. I had already been a mother, a son, a father, a brother, and a grandmother. But not knowing things as they really are, I was reborn and reborn, never having enough. So what we do know about her early life is that both she and her sister Maya were essentially princesses in the clan of people in northern India. And so they each were subject to a prophecy. So it was very common at that time to kind of tell the fortune of a baby that was being born. And the prophecy about these two women was that they would give birth to a wonderful, wise, and benevolent king. And they actually both went on to marry the same man, King Suddhodana. So at the time, it was common to have multiple wives in that era. And by some accounts, Mahapajapati was present for the Buddha's birth. She doesn't appear in the sutra that you're going to hear about her, but there are some stories that are older, apparently, that there were women present, including Queen Maya and her sister, Gautami. But as I said, there's not much written down about her after her life in that time period. And so eventually what we do know is that her husband, the king, died, and she decided to follow her own spiritual yearning and become what was known as a home leaver. So a person who renounces their worldly possessions and connections, even their family ties, and becomes a spiritual seeker. And so she clothes herself in a yellow robe and calls the barber to come and shave her head. And so eventually she becomes the leader of a group of women practitioners. And they approach the Buddha to request to be included in this community of monks. You may have heard this story before, so I won't go into great detail, but she asks the Buddha, can we join this group? And he says no at first. And it is his cousin, his attendant, Ananda, who challenges the Buddha and says, can women not also become awakened? And the Buddha says, well, yes, they can. And so he encourages that they be allowed to join the community, and they do. So Maha Prajapati is remembered as a very spiritual, wise, loving, and strong person who was deeply revered by her fellow nuns. And we also, as I mentioned, remember her as our first female Buddhist ancestor, kind of our foremother, if you will. And it may not be totally obvious why this practice of recognizing ancestors is so important in Buddhism. But Buddhism is a practice that's handed down from teacher to student, so person to person. So while we have many, many scriptures, sutras, that were written down after the time of the Buddha, and those also that came later by other Buddhist wise people, it's not sort of a practice of the book. The practice happens, again, in that relationship with a Sangha and with a teacher. And so that reverence for the people who've come before us is a very integral part, because we recognize that if they did not do what they did, we could not do what we are doing. So I just wanted to finish this section then with a poem that is attributed to Maha Prajapati, probably toward the end of her life. And it's something that, again, it was an oral culture at the time, so everything that you hear from the sutras was written down quite a long time later. But you'll hear some echoes of what we heard in that teaching of the Buddha about the relationship between parents and their children. So she's addressing the Buddha in this poem. Buddha, hero, praise be to you, you foremost among all beings. You who have released me from pain, and so many other beings too. All suffering has been understood. The source of craving has withered. Cessation has been touched by me on the noble eightfold path. I've been mother and son before, and father, brother, grandmother too. Not understanding what was real, I flowed on without finding peace. But now I've seen the Blessed One. This is my last compounded form. The onflowing of birth has expired. There is no more rebecoming now. See the gathering of followers, putting forth effort, self-controlled, always with strong resolution. This is how to honor the Buddhas. Surely for the good of so many did Maya give birth to Gautama, who bursts asunder the mass of pain of those stricken by sickness and death. So now we will do a special ritual, maybe just remembering our biological mothers, maybe remembering the other mothers in our lives, whatever form they have taken. And what we will be doing is sharing one of these beautiful paper petals. So each person will come up, we'll form two lines. And these petals are from the lanterns that you see. And so if your mother is still living, you will take a red petal. And if your mother has passed away, a white petal. And we'll have a couple of our volunteers to come and pin these on. So while we're doing this flower offering, we're going to be chanting the name of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. And the Bodhisattva of compassion in many cultures is depicted as sort of an androgynous figure, having both male and female qualities, and also sometimes is depicted as female. And so the chant that we will be doing is Namo, I go for refuge to, Avalokiteshvara. So let's say the name, Avalokiteshvara. Avalokiteshvara. So I will begin the chant in a moment, but I'll have Magamak and Maunlaju come up and be the pinners of the flowers. I'm just going to take the microphone off for this part. So, I ask that you go ahead and straighten your mats and cushions, and please come stand. So while we're doing the chant, bringing our hands palm to palm, and then we'll begin with the front row, coming up and making 2 lines, and then just follow your row around behind. When you've received your flower, you can go back and stand at your place and continue with the chant until everyone is. So here is how the chant goes. Namo Avalokiteshvara. 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 Namo So now let's just have maybe a moment of quiet. for being here. May you find opportunities to reflect on your relationship with your parents, perhaps finding opportunities to continue that process of waking up together. And I'm just appreciating everyone's presence here today. So let's end with our 4 great Bodhisattva vows. Please repeat after me. All beings, one body.
All beings, one body.
I vow to liberate.
I vow to liberate.
Blind passions, one root.
Blind passions, one root.
I vow to terminate.
I vow to terminate.
Dharma gates, one mind.
Dharma gates, one mind.
I vow to penetrate.
I vow to penetrate.
The great way of Buddha.
The great way of Buddha.
I vow to realize.
I vow to realize.
Do we have someone doing announcements?
We do.
Yes. All right. Do you want the microphone? Sure. Oh, it's here.
So welcome everybody to the Ann Arbor Zen Buddhist Temple, especially those of you who are here for maybe the first time. We have a lot of things going on, especially at this time of year. We have a plethora of study groups. We have our BIPOC members meeting, which is, I believe, Saturdays at 3. Will Recovery Dharma be meeting today?
Yes, 3 at 3. At noon, in the historical temple, the Yellow House next door.
Recovery Dharma, noon, right next door. We have a lot more information. I'm just reading off of the golden flyer here, which is available in the foyer if you want further information. And really the best way to kind of stay abreast of temple news is to sign up for our email bulletin. So there's a sign up sheet for that out there as well. The most important thing that is upcoming is Buddha's birthday. And so next week we will be celebrating Buddha's birthday. That's also a family service. So if you have any children in your life who might want to learn a little bit more about Buddhism, or also just might want to have a slice of cake, bring them around next week for the 10 a.m. service. It's going to be
Parents too.
and parents too. Yeah,
Just send them over.
send everybody. There is
Actually, everybody who has a mother is invited,
everybody with a mother. You heard it here.
whether that mother is living or passed.
Everyone, all of us bodhisattvas. There is a sign-up sheet also, as well as a Google form. If you'd like to bring something for our vegetarian potluck after service. And we have an amazing birthday cake. The Buddha will be turning
2,557.
2,557. 67?
Yeah. 2,567.
Oh, wow.
It's gonna, we won't have probably that many candles, but it'll be a really good cake. If you have already signed up to volunteer, we need a lot of help, not just with the potluck, but with setting up, cleaning up the garden. If you've already signed up to volunteer, we'll be in touch via email. If you haven't already signed up, please consider doing so. You can also sign up to dedicate one of these wonderful lanterns, maybe to someone close to you who has passed away, maybe just for peace in this world. If you'd like further information about that, there is another sign-up sheet out in the foyer, or you can talk to any person in the gray robes.
We just received a lantern dedication from a family whose daughter is graduating, and so it is for her good health as she continues on with her life. So that's just another example.
So the lantern dedication is on lilac form.
Lilac form, yes. We like to color code here. Lastly, the temple is supported by your kind donations of time and money. If you would like to donate your time, we need 4 or 5 strong people to help us move some tables and chairs out of the basement right now after service. And people who might not want to move tables and chairs, there will be a little bit of work practice in the garden. So that's a really good way to donate your time. If you'd like to make a monetary donation, there's a fishbowl outside. Have I missed anything?
Garden folks, please meet by the bell shed, which is just sort of a rusty colored building with a bell outside.
Garden folks meet out back by the bell shed.
And
table moving folks can meet by that door, but outside.
That door outside if you're,
the back door of this room.
yes. Okay, thank you. Please stand.
So we'll close our service with 3 formal vows facing the altar. Again, bringing our hands palm to palm. Just taking a moment to feel our body in space. And then making vow. One last housekeeping note before we leave the meditation hall. If you have a mat and cushion that is not part of this front row that's touching the carpet, with this side of the room, if the mats could be placed in 2 piles at the back of the room by the black marble table and the round cushions in the red cubbies. And for this side of the room, the mats and cushions can all be stacked on this little red stage here. Thank you for your help.